Hi everyone, this is Sandra with Brown's Point Ceramics. In this video, today I'm going to show you how I clean my greenware. The first step that I want to cover is the different tools that I use when I personally clean my own pieces. This is definitely not the same set of tools that everybody will use, and that's completely fine. Everybody, I think, will over time find tools that they prefer over others, and that's exactly what I have been doing myself. So let's get started. I like to have always some water here right next to me because I'm using my dining room table, which I've already kind of ruined. I like to put something over it. I prefer it to be a semi-wet towel. What this helps me with is it helps catch all of the dust as I clean the pieces, and so it makes it so that there's less dust flying around and that I would be potentially inhaling. All right, so as far as other tools that I have a bunch. I have a light right next to me at all times. I have a bunch of different tools that I use for cleaning purposes. One of the main ones that I like to use is this little sanders. I get them from Glacier Ceramics, and I usually keep this two around. This one is what a brand new one looks like. Over time, when they start wearing out, I separate them and I keep this piece as well. What I like about it is that it's a lot thinner, and so it helps me get in between tight spaces. Out of these other tools, let's walk through them quickly. I like this one a lot to remove seams. I have this other one as well. These are really heavy duty tools, which I really enjoy, metal ones. Then I have these Kemper tools as well here. Let me just kind of show you these ones. These ones right here are your typical dotting tools, and so what I use them is anytime that I have to make any indents or carve out some of the detail. These ones will be very helpful for that. This aside, I also have a brush with me at all times. This little guy right here helps also get into the really small spaces. The X-Acto knife and texture tools. So I have the very old blue tool, as everybody knows it, and the new one that Brown's Point Ceramics actually makes, and it's a red tool. All right, one other thing that I keep around is sponges in all sizes. I like this particular set because it comes in all the different sizes. Let me just get those out. This is what a brand new packet looks like, and I get them from Amazon in bulk. All right, and so you see the different sizes that they come in. I also keep a container of slip, and I keep this other guy around. So this one, it just helps thicken the slip whenever I have to make any repairs. You could also use App 2. That's another option for this. And I know that there's people that create their own mixes at home using vinegar and some other materials, some other ingredients, I should say. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I have 3 pieces today that I'm gonna show you how I clean. So I have this little gnome right here. I have this snowman and the mummy gnome. What I like about these 3 pieces is they all have slightly different complexities. This gnome right here, one of the hardest parts is recreating some of the detail around the tree. What's nice about it is that once you figure it out, pretty much all of the other clay magic trees will have the exact same pattern. So once you get comfortable with this, you can pretty much use it for any other tree. And honestly, even other brands of molds will have a very similar type of texture. So once again, figure it out once, and then you can use it for other pieces too. This snowman right here, he just has a lot of little details happening around the piece. So we'll cover some of that. And the mummy gnome, this one is a little bit of a pain to clean, and the reason why is because of these bandages that it has here, right? So this mummy bandages, those are really interesting in terms of the texture and require to pay a little bit of attention when you try to re-add it back. All right, so let me go ahead and get started with this one over here. And to get started, what I like to do with all of my pieces is I like to start by removing the seams. And so what I do is I just grab this one, for example, this one tool, which I just personally enjoy for this particular step, and start carving out, removing those seams, carving off those seams. Okay, so this step will take me a little bit, so I'm gonna pause my video and kind of resume once I've finished. But pretty much what I'm gonna be doing with this piece and all the others is just going around that seam line and try to remove enough of it so that once I start sanding off this part right here, it's pretty easy to get rid of it completely. All right, so let me just, I guess I can finish this part right here and then pause and skip to the other pieces. Let's do this. And this can be done fairly quickly as a step. You're not really having to pay too much attention here to what you're taking off. We'll do the same thing here at the bottom. Okay. Yeah, I still have this side. Alright. Let me set this one aside. I'm gonna get the snowman. When I'm working on multiple pieces, I sometimes do this, go and repeat the same step over all of them, just to change things up a little bit. And sometimes I will just go through all of the steps with one piece, and then, you know, once I'm completely finished with that one, go on to the next one. Doesn't really matter the order, it's whatever you're comfortable with, I guess. All right, let me pause the video here and then we'll come back once I'm done removing all the seams. All right, and so we're back on the video here. I'm almost done removing the lines for this one piece. And as you can see here, all of the dust is getting caught by this wet towel, so that does really help a lot. Okay, all right, so I'm done with this tool for now. I'm going to step number 2, which is to just sand off the rest of those seam lines, make sure that they are completely gone. I know some people who, when they see detail like in this piece, they like to not sand it off too much because they want to keep some of those lines to kind of blend them into the rest of the texture. Personally, I'm perfectly fine adding it back later, so I'm fine removing it at this stage. So I take this tool, and the one side is coarser than the other one. I like this brown one, just as a personal choice. So I'm just going around, and thanks to the fact that I removed most of that seam line already, when you use this tool, it's fairly easy to get rid of the rest of it. One thing that you want to do as you start sanding off some pieces, when there is some detail, like in this case, these lines of that braid that need to be added back, you want to be paying attention to the pattern that the line is following, especially if after you remove that seam line, it's going to kind of make it a little bit difficult to see. You want to kind of imprint that in your memory while you still have a good visual of it with the seam line in place. All right, so bottom part, same thing. Perfect. This side over here. Oops. And sometimes you will reveal, once you sand off these things, you will reveal those little air bubbles in there. All right, which I'll have to patch later. And by the way, those air bubbles, if you want to comment on that, which I'm sure some people would, I do know why they happen. They do happen, at least to me, because I pour the slip a little bit too fast onto the molds. If you have followed my page, you know that I like to pour a bunch of molds at once, And so one of the downsides of that is that I try to move through them pretty fast. So I try to mix my slip, and sometimes I don't let it rest enough. And so there's air bubbles that are introduced in it. And after I pour the pieces, then that kind of happens. And as you see, this is where I will grab this little piece right here, which is a little bit thinner, so it's easier to get kind of like under this 3 little branches there, and remove the part of the seam line that's still showing up in there. Okay, I think this one, it's good. I'm gonna put that to the side and repeat the process for the other pieces. And once again, I'll pause the video here and restart it as soon as I'm done with those other 2 pieces. All right, so just very quickly here on this piece, this one has some really small areas right here where it's really hard to get into to clear that seam line. So just wanted to show you once again how I use this little piece over here to sand it. And you have to sometimes kind of wiggle it there, make sure that it does get rid of that seam line in that area. This is also where a different tool like this one might be helpful. I know at least one person who uses that. This can get into those tight spaces, and so will help also remove some of that line. All right, so I'm almost done with this last piece over here. And while I finish this one off, just wanted to add a quick comment about this video. So I decided to do this video because I know a lot of people have been asking for it in the groups, but by no means do I wanna imply or say that this is the only way to clean Greenware or the best way. It is simply my way. I'm by no means an expert. We have been doing ceramics with Browns Point Ceramics for how long? I think it's been still less than a year. And I know that there's plenty of people around who have been in the business for 30+ years. So if you get different guidance from your teacher or ceramic shop owner, then by no means does that mean that I'm right, they're wrong, or vice versa, I would say. So just take all the information with a grain of salt. And if you are doing ceramics yourself and cleaning Greenware yourself, you get to set your standards. You get to set what you're happy with in terms of the quality of your cleaning. And obviously through experimentation, you can find whatever tools do the job the way that you like it done. Okay, I think this one is done. One thing that I like to do is, as you start inspecting the pieces and you want to see that seam line, I know there is the touch test that you can do, which is you just rub around that part, and if you feel that that little bump of the line, then that means it's still there. It's a good way to test for it. The other one that I do is I just like to look at it from different angles. Sometimes the light will reveal where there's still some of that line as you start kind of turning it around. That's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm still seeing a little bit of it. There's certainly parts where it's gonna be much easier to hide it than in other areas. Like this part right here, I'm not too worried about because I'm going to be re-adding that detail of the bandages. So I think that's gonna help disguise it quite a lot, honestly. All right, so I think it's fine there. Happy with how it looks. And so now I'm gonna start focusing. I'm gonna finish off each piece individually just because it does deserve the attention. So I think at this point what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get one of my sponges, and I like these ones because they are round here on the bottom. So what I like to do is just dip them in water, just enough to get it moist, not too much water. And so I just do the bottom part by twisting this around like that. And you can use it to smooth out and kind of hide a little bit more of that seam line, if you would. As I mentioned, there's going to be some patching that I need to do here, but everything else as far as this area is concerned is looking good to me. So I'm going to leave that till the end. All right, so here where that line was, as I mentioned, I sanded it off already, so I think the next step is to add some of the texture back, and this is where this kind of tools will be helpful. So the reason that I like to have the different sizes of those dotting tools are because not every single line will be the exact same thickness, and so I try to find the one that matches. So let me see if you can see that here, but there's the lines of the braid there, and so I feel like this particular size right here would be just perfect. I personally like to wet the area where I'm going to be re-adding the detail just a little bit. I find that it makes it a little bit easier, and so I'm going to start going and re-adding it back there. And sometimes, because this leaves a really sharp line once you start re-adding the detail back, sometimes what I find that useful to do is using the same sponges. I will smooth that out a little bit more, and what that does is it helps blend it with the rest of the piece. So I don't know if you can tell, but it's being added back there. All right, and we'll do the same thing on this side. Wet first before I add it. I was using this side over here. Okay, so same thing to kind of smooth it out. All right, perfect. Now on to the branches. So what I've discovered with these lines right here, at least based on my observations, is if I try to do it with a tool like this one, this will make a line which is about the same thickness all throughout, and these branches right here are not really all the same thickness, so it really doesn't blend the design back the way that I like it. So instead, what I prefer to use is I go back to this tool, and I personally like the tip of this guy right here. I feel that it does help add back some of that detail. With the trees, you have to get comfortable because you cannot hesitate too much. And so what I do is I just go and kind of carve that off, adding that back. And I follow a little bit of a random pattern as I do this because you don't want it to look like it's, not matching the design. And it is meant to be somewhat random. Okay. All right, so once again, once I add it back, that's kind of what it looks like. And I'm gonna try to disguise it a little bit only by wetting this part right here. Okay, and it's looking pretty good to me. So let's repeat the step on the other side. Okay. Perfect. She's looking pretty good. So I have still a little to-do item, which I'm gonna leave until the end because I just like to procrastinate. But other than that, I think this piece is looking pretty good. If I wanted to, just to be a little bit extra picky, on the bottom parts of the trees right here, you also have a little bit of a texture. You will only notice it if you hold the piece this way. And that texture is a little bit different than the one on top here. I actually have already figured out a tool that I can use to recreate it. And it's this one here. It's a very small tip. And so what you can do is just, once again, you want to follow a little bit of a random pattern as you add this, but you just go and start scraping off a little bit from those areas. And the same thing on the other side. right, so I think now we're good. I'm gonna set this one aside and go on to this guy, which is a little bit more difficult in terms of detail. All right, so wherever there was a line, I like to follow it again with this tool and see where there might be a need to re-add some of that detail back. And really, once again, what you want to do is match whatever's going on in that area, right? So here, the snowman is kind of holding a basket. I see that where the line was, there's the little texture of the basket. So I'm gonna just reaffirm some of those lines in there. And once again, sometimes I add them and remove a little bit of it, take some of it back with the sponge just to make a blend. All right, there's some other pattern going on here. This is still part of the basket, so let's just re-add it there. I see a little corner where I may have forgotten to take some of that seam line, so I'm gonna take the opportunity to remove it. All right, this part right here, the hat, is not something that I really enjoy. It's a weird texture. I don't know if you can see it, but it doesn't really, in my opinion, have a specific design. So one trick that I like to do when I'm trying to figure out how to re-add back some of the detail is I take the tool and kind of try to train my hand. And so the way that I do is I will just go over the lines, following kind of the movements of those lines in there. And so I am starting to sense that it is random for sure, but it does follow like a little circle curve of sorts as it goes in and out, in and out, in and out. So I'm gonna try to do the exact same thing on that part where it's missing. I'm gonna wet it and just do that. It's like little swirls, but they're not like a full swirl. It's kind of like 50% of it, and then it stops and it goes in a different direction. So very much random. And remember, when you're trying to figure out a texture for the first time, you could go in it very lightly and see what it looks like after you work on that area. And then if you don't like it, you still have the option to use the sponge to remove it again and try one more time. All right, I'm gonna take some of it back with the sponge. Okay. Well, it's kind of hard to see, but there's definitely something there now, which is the whole goal, right? You don't want to leave it to where it's very clear that there's supposed to be a texture and now it's completely gone. You want to be able to see something. So I don't know if you can tell in the camera, but there's now some texture back in that area. Okay, so I keep going around it. There's the other side, which also needs the exact same thing done to it. Now I'm going with the sponge again to smooth that out. Okay, it's good. This tree right here is interesting because it doesn't really have a lot of detail in itself. So once you remove the seam line, there's really nothing that you need to add to it. If I keep going though, down this side, I do see one other part here of the vest that needs once again, some sort of texture added back. I think I should be using this other side, a little bit thicker of a line. Okay, let's do this right here. Okay, there's the texture right here of the body. Once again, I'm not sure if you can tell, but there is definitely something going on this part right here. So when I sanded up the line, that's been now it's gone. One thing that I was happy to discover with our red tool is we have made one of the tips on this tool that we designed has this, which we call the toad texture. So it's supposed to recreate skin of a frog or toad. And so what I like about it is that there's actually obviously other uses for it. And I realized that it actually works really well for this type of piece because it does create some of the same type of patterns here. So it all depends on how you apply it. If you were to apply this on really wet greenware, it will definitely leave a mark that's very unique and will be resembling very closely skin texture of a frog. If you apply it on dry greenware like it is right now, it's fairly dry, it's gonna be a different type of result. And so that's pretty much what I've noticed is if I just go ahead and apply it on this piece randomly here, it helps me give it that effect that I'm looking for. Okay, so you probably can sort of see in the video how there is something being added back to it. I am going to once again use the sponge to help blend it in with the rest of it. So it's there right now, and now let's sponge it. So I really like it because once you put the sponge, it's still there. It might not be the exact same pattern as here, but it is pretty damn close. So I really like it. All right, cool. So finally, oh, I might not forget. Let me not forget this other side over here. Oops, and I wet it, so it might be a little bit more obvious on this side. But let's do this side too. I did forget the other side on one of these pieces that I was cleaning recently, and when I saw that piece after firing, I was so upset that I had completely ignored that there was this other side of it. Okay, all right, so let me clean this up a little bit here, and using the same sponge, wetting it a little bit, I'm going to perfect this circle at the bottom. I just like to go in circular motion here. Helps me make a circle as good as it gets. And it looks like I have another little to-do for later on this one. Okay. You see how beautiful and clean it looks already here. Alrighty. There's still a little bit of the seam line that I see there. Sometimes keep in mind, when you do the touch test, you will not feel it, even though you can see it. In some pieces, those lines will remain all the way until you fire the piece. I mean, even after firing, you will still be able to see it. At the end of the day, the important thing is, even if you see it, as long as you don't feel it, so as long as it's not really impacting the surface of the piece, then it's fine. I mean, people are gonna paint over it, so it's fine if you see it, but don't feel it. All right. Okay, so I think this guy is done. And let's move on to the fun one, the mummy. Okay, so one thing that I like to do with this guy first is just go around and mark again where the bandage starts and ends on the piece. This one is a little bit too thin and small of a end for it, so I'm gonna find a little bit of a bigger tool here. Let's see. Oops, sorry. Let me wet it, and then I think it's this one, the one that I like. I'm just gonna go delineate here where those bandages are supposed to fall. I'm not too worried about those lines being noticeable because I do, once again, I'm going to be adding a lot of texture back in a minute, so a lot of this is gonna get disguised pretty well. This is mostly for my own guidance and make sure I don't add the detail outside the lines where they're meant to go. Okay, so I marked the areas, and now it's the fun part. What's interesting about this texture right here, it's once again very much random. There is not a particular pattern. So if it's random, then you gotta go at it with the same approach. And what I've noticed is that once again, this tool right here is super helpful at working with it. What I do is hold it as I'm showing you and just randomly start taking little chunks and making a little bit of dents around the area where the bandage is supposed to go. There's not really a exact science to this. It's what I found works for me. I know some other people have different methods of re-adding the texture, so if you have your own, feel free to follow that instead. Okay, so I go with it and I kind of add it back, and then if I kind of dust it off and see how it looks compared to the rest of it. If I feel like I need to add a little bit more, then I go back at it again until I'm happy with it. All right, cool. That looks actually pretty good. So I'm going to do the same on the rest of it. This is as tedious as it gets. Honestly, this is not one of my favorite pieces to clean. Definitely not gonna, you're not gonna make money on this one if you spend this much time cleaning it. This is a really small piece, so usually sells for fairly cheap. And you end up putting a lot more time on it than some of the other pieces. Okay, so I think that's good there. We have some here. All right, this is gonna take me a while, so I'm gonna pause the video and come back once I'm finished. All right, and I think I'm pretty much done re-adding the detail, and I'm pretty happy with it. I mean, it's really hard to tell the difference. And then same thing on this other side. This side right here has some lines that are a little bit sharper than I would like them to be. So once again, a little bit of a sponging takes care of that. Okay, cool. So the bottom part, the last part right here that I need to worry about. I have to-dos for all of these pieces, little air pockets that I need to take care of in a minute. But let me first get this circle looking as perfect as we can. And I do realize that some people really don't care about what the bottom looks like, but I know quite a few that do, including myself. So I try to be somewhat picky about it. Okay. All right, this guy is done. I'm actually start with this one since it is fairly easy. It has two really tiny holes there that I need to patch. So for the patching, what I like to do is I keep a bag around of just solid clay. It's in a Ziploc bag, so it's still wet. I don't want it to dry out completely. And so I just grab a little chunk of it I don't absolutely need to have this here. I could also use the slip and just thicken it until it's solid enough for what I need it. But I like to play around with this plus the slip, and so I kind of mix them both. It just helps me get to the consistency I need a lot faster, because if you see the slip, it's pretty liquidy right now. So I'm gonna do my little mix here. And I'll tell you honestly, I don't think I've seen anybody else do this before, so this is completely my own way. I'm sure other people mix a slip. I think most people mix the slip with their solution, and that's about it. I've never seen or heard of anybody bringing in some of their more solid slip. Oh, this is a brand new bottle, so let me see if I can find a open one already here. 1 second. Okay, do have an open one. All right. This is really just like playing around with clay at this point. Try to get it to the right consistency by mixing it all together, and then just plugging those holes here and there. Once again, I'm sure other people will comment when they see this video and tell me the hundreds of different ways that they will deal with this. Happy to hear your advice. This is just what I figured out on my own. Okay, so I kind of patch that in, and obviously I have to smooth it out and clean it so it doesn't look too messy. So I just go with the sponge and blend it in. And sometimes as I'm blending this in, because I'm using the sponge, it will end up revealing a few other little tiny holes, which I'm gonna have to repeat the same process on. Okay, so that one is good there. Let me get rid of this one over here. All right, that wasn't too hard. One other thing that I do sometimes is I will grab the brush that I keep around and just apply sometimes the slip that way. Or with a sponge or your fingers, whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, pretty happy with how it looks right now. I mean, I guess you could argue this circle is not a perfect circle, but I think it still looks good. And the rest of it looks good. Just be careful not to mess one of the other parts while you're not paying attention to them. Okay. All right, you're good. So he goes into the good pile. This one right here has that little hole there. What I'm gonna do with this one is I actually wanna wet it a little bit. I'm going to use this same solution to wet it. I just want to make sure that when I apply the clay, it does stay and it blends with the rest of the piece rather than trying to come out later during firing or as it dries. All right, cool. It's staying there pretty good. Clean my hand and clean that off. And of course, if you apply too much of the sponge, so much so that you end up removing once again some of the detail, we'll have to do the needful and add it back. I'm going to smooth that out again, and I think this is pretty good as it looks right now. That circle, once again, not absolutely perfect, so I'm gonna try just a little bit more here. Don't wanna overdo it either. I think he's ready for the kiln. And we have one last one. All right, same process here. Gonna try and wet it first. Let's get this one does. This is, I think, one of the bigger holes, so might take me a little bit more clay to cover it. All right, almost done. Gets a little messy, but I guess that's the price I pay for steering that slip so much and adding those air pockets to it. Okay, so I'm gonna use the sponge to clean that mess, including from this other side where I got it unintentionally. Let's get it out of there. Okay. Once again, it's looking pretty good now. Pretty happy. I gotta let it dry. Once it dries, that little bit of clay might actually start showing up again. So if it's noticeable, then I'll kind of patch it one more time to make sure it's completely hidden. But other than that, once again, this piece is ready to go for the kiln. All right, and that's about the entire process that I follow. Obviously, each piece will have its own different challenges. Most of them being around the detail and the texture that you gotta add to them. But it's not rocket science. I think that with a little bit of practice, anybody who puts the time into it can definitely figure it out. So thank you for watching, and I hope that this was helpful. Thanks. Bye.